Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator in-depth weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for July 8th of 2024. For today, we do have an enhanced risk for eastern Texas, western Louisiana, and southwestern Arkansas. This is associated with Tropical Storm Beryl, and the primary driving risk is a 10% tornado risk. My internet is pretty slow right now where I am, so please bear with me. We do have a 10% tornado risk for this enhanced risk region. That's going to be the primary driving risk for this enhanced risk region for today. And of course, the primary thing that we're going to be covering in today's forecast, on top of that flooding risk, we also have a 5% damaging wind risk for this entire area. But because it is a tropical system, we don't really have all that much of a hail risk. But the wind risk isn't going to be necessarily associated with that much of a tropical risk. Of course, tropical damaging wind gusts are still expected, and we will cover that in today's forecast. However, the current risk for wind gusts that you are seeing right here is going to be primarily related and forecasted associated with severe thunderstorms in the region, and not really associated with any tropical impacts. However, again, strong damaging wind gusts and widespread damaging wind gusts that could potentially be hazardous to property and potentially even life if you're caught outside of them are still expected across this region, even if they aren't going to be necessarily too much associated with all that much of a risk for severe thunderstorms in particular. And again, because I said earlier, this is a tropical system, we don't have that much of a hail risk because speed share is a hurricane's kryptonite, so we don't really have all that much of a hail risk. We do have a couple marginal risks here across different portions of the United States, including western Texas, northern New Mexico, and southern Colorado, as well as northern Michigan into portions of eastern Wisconsin there. Don't really have all that much of a tornado risk with any of those. We do have a 5% damaging wind risk for all of the different marginal risks, as well as a 5% hail risk, where we could see the potential of some isolated small to medium hail for the risks that include New Mexico, Colorado, and Texas. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for southern Indiana, southern Illinois, southeastern Missouri, northwestern Texas or Tennessee, and western Kentucky there. We also do have another marginal risk for the New England corridor for Maine into New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Risks for tomorrow do include a 5% tornado risk for the slight risk region, where we could see the potential for a couple of tornadoes, a 5% damaging wind risk for both locations for the potential of severe thunderstorms, where we could see the potential of some isolated severe damaging wind gusts, as well as a 5% hail risk for the marginal risk in the New England corridor there, without all that much of a hail risk for the slight risk in the Ohio River Valley region. For day 3 outlook for July 10th, we do have a marginal risk for the New England corridor again for southern New York State and northern Pennsylvania, with a probabilistic 5% risk for severe thunderstorms across that region combined. And then for day 4, day 8 outlook, we currently don't have anything issued that is upcoming. Taking a look at our WPC outlooks and the risk for flooding for today, we do have a moderate risk for flash flooding, which is at least a 40% risk of flash flooding in any location across this region. For southwestern Arkansas, southeastern Oklahoma, northwestern Louisiana, and northeastern Texas in the Arklatex region there. Again, this is going to be another huge risk that is going to be associated with Tropical Storm Beryl here, including that tornado risk. Flooding is going to be another significant one that could potentially be life-threatening if you live in any areas that you know are prone to flooding over extended periods of time. So definitely make sure you are watching out for any rising waters. If you do live by any waterways or any creeks that you know love to swell whenever it gets any sort of rainfall or any heavy rainfall, this is definitely going to be no joke as far as Tropical Storm Beryl goes, and definitely up there with that tornado risk for today. So flooding, again, is another big one that you need to be on alert for if you do live in the affected region. We also have a marginal risk for flash flooding for southern Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, eastern Alabama, and across the eastern the coastline of Florida there, as well as another marginal risk for southern Colorado, eastern New Mexico, into western Texas there, where we could see the potential for some isolated flash flooding. But again, the moderate risk will be something that we will cover in today's forecast. For tomorrow, we do have a dual slight risk, one for southern Michigan, Indiana, Western Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri there, and northern Arkansas, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding. Then we also have another slight risk for the Gulf Coast, extending from Louisiana, including the New Orleans region, into the Florida Panhandle, where we could see the potential for some inland scattered flash flooding. Then for day 3 outlook on the 10th, July 10th, we do have a slight risk for the New England corridor, as well as Michigan, northern Indiana, northern Ohio, including Pennsylvania, New York State, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, where we could see the potential for some scattered flash flooding. Taking a look at the National Hurricane Center and its latest key messages about Tropical Storm Beryl. Again, Tropical Storm Beryl has already made landfall in eastern Texas here, and we do have a tropical storm warning for the Houston, I think that's the Houston region, and along the coastline there. It is expected to continue northeastward into portions of the Mississippi River Valley, into the Ohio River Valley, and into portions of the western New England corridor as well, as a tropical depression or a post-tropical depression. This is expected to bring the hazards of flooding, as well as the potential for some severe thunderstorms with that as well. Primarily the risk of tornadoes embedded with this system, as because of the rotational energy of tropical systems like this, even left over, they generate a lot of directional shear, and that allows for a lot of quick tornado development. Even brief to even strong tornadoes are possible with tropical systems. And again, we do have that 5% tornado risk for tomorrow for this region in particular that is going to be associated with the remnants of Tropical Storm Beryl here. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off with our 500 millibars in our upper air pattern and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. We don't really have to worry about any frontal systems triggering our severe thunderstorms, because this will kind of just form severe thunderstorms wherever it wants, because of a lot of moisture and just general support, especially at 500 millibars and from the upper air aloft for the risk for severe thunderstorms. And that's what we're seeing here. Embedded with Tropical Storm Beryl, we have a lot of strong 500 millibar flow here, upwards of 50 to 60 knots embedded on the eastern side, just to the east of the eye there, or whatever is left of it. And that trough there embedded in Hurricane Beryl will support a lot of lift and support the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, including the potential for tornadoes as well. We also have a lot of defluence across this region, with wind vectors closer to the center of Tropical Storm Beryl, going more so to the west, and winds on the eastern side of this strong air aloft at 500 millibars is going more so to the north there. So there is some noticeable defluence, and that will support even more lift if there wasn't a lot of lift already, to furthermore support that risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our 700 millibars and our low-level jet and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes across this region, we are expected to see a very, very strong low-level jet, which is going to be mainly associated with the strong low-level winds associated with Tropical Storm Beryl on the eastern side of whatever is left of the eye. So we are expected to see kind of a pseudo low-level jet that will act basically the same as a low-level jet normally would in supporting the risk for tornadoes, with 700 millibar flow that is going to be absurdly strong, upwards of 50 to 60, and what seems to be potentially even 65 knots, maybe even approaching 70 knots. It was at 70 knots before it did weaken. However, associated with storms will probably be significantly weaker, more so down to 50 to 60 knots across this region. Either way, that is still absurdly strong and will support an insane amount of directional shear and support a risk for widespread tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our 200 millibar flow in our extreme upper level flow and how that's going to support the risk for severe thunderstorms overall, because I'm not really worried that much about the risk for hail, because again, this is a tropical system. As far as our 200 millibar flow goes, we do have a pretty strong trough that is currently positively tilted, but it is currently positioned around the northern plains into the Midwest and down in the southwest there. So we do have a trough here, and we also have a lot of strong 200 millibar flow as a result of that to the north of where Tropical Storm Beryl is expected to move through. And that trough doesn't really look like it is expected to move for at least a while, and is definitely going to impede on Tropical Storm Beryl. And with strong 200 millibar flow comes wind shear, and because wind shear is a tropical system's kryptonite again, that will significantly inhibit any strengthening, if there even was a chance for Beryl to strengthen to begin with, because it has already made landfall. This will further accelerate the weakening of Tropical Storm Beryl after today. But again, there will still be the strong low-level flow and the potential for tornadoes going forward into tomorrow. As far as the risk for severe thunderstorms goes, I'm not really sure, not really too sure to be honest, because this isn't really going to be associated with the tropical system. I just don't have enough experience with tropical systems to begin with to really give that good of an insight about how our 200 millibar flow is going to affect the risk for tornadoes by itself. But I do know that it will impede and accelerate the weakening of Tropical Storm Beryl over time, but I don't really know how well it's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms. But either way, we still have a really big risk for severe thunderstorms, including tornadoes, on the table for today, outside of that flooding risk. Taking a look at the storm volatility and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes overall, we are expected to see an insane amount of storm volatility and directional shear as a result of that very strong surface flow. And yeah, it's absolutely absurd. I don't really know what to say. There's so much directional shear here that any severe thunderstorm capable of producing a tornado, as long as it's surface based and has a good updraft, will be capable of producing a strong tornado, especially with the amount of shear that's across this region, with storm volatility at 0 to 3 kilometer reaching 400 meters squared a second squared across this region. We won't see as much shear directly to the east of the remnants of Tropical Storm Beryl's eye, because the winds are more uniform there, and in turn less directional shear. However, further to the north of that eye, there is a little bit of wiggle room and a little bit more difference with height, so there is a little bit more directional shear there, but it very perfectly feeds into this region. And even where the winds are more uniform, there's still an insane amount of directional shear that will be more than readily available to any storms that want to use it. So again, there will be a significant amount of shear across this region, way more than enough to support tornadoes, including the possibility of significant tornadoes across this region. So again, not only have widespread tornadoes been ongoing as of right now, they are expected to continue as a result of this shear unless instability weakens. Before we go too in-depth on this and we look at our instability, I do want to talk about our flooding risk for today, because that is going to be another significant risk that is going to be included with Tropical Storm Beryl on top of that tornado risk. Again, we are expected to see an insane amount of flooding, especially over the next 48 hours for this region, including the next 24 hours as well. And keep in mind that the high-resolution ensemble forecast models do tend to make things a little bit more conservative than what they truly are. So seeing this as high rain is how high rainfalls are, that is honestly quite scary, with rainfall totals on our high-resolution ensemble forecast system getting upwards of 7 inches to 10 inches and maybe even 15 inches in some of the lighter yellow regions. So in this corridor here, there's going to be an insane amount of rainfall, and that is going to accumulate in low-lying areas and make rivers and creeks swell way beyond what they should be. So if you do know that you live in an area that tends to get a lot of accumulation during heavy rainfall and is prone to flooding, please be on the lookout for any flooding, because it could potentially be life-threatening, as there will be an insane amount of accumulation, and that will continue to run off of higher elevations as well over the next couple of days. So again, please be on the lookout for flash flooding, because it could potentially be life-threatening if you know that you are prone to flooding in this region. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our instability and in turn our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, because we are expected to see so much rainfall across this region and so much heavy cloud cover as a result of Tropical Storm Beryl, our temperatures aren't expected to really get all that high, with ensemble mean temperatures getting upwards of what seems to be 80 degrees in the enhanced risk region, which is still pretty high and will definitely support quite a lot of instability across this region. But we will have to look at things like cloud cover and dew points to be more sure. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability and in turn our risk for severe thunderstorms, we are expected to see a ton of moisture that's going to be pulled out of the Gulf of Mexico by all the strong low-level flow on the eastern side of the eye of Tropical Storm Beryl. Because of all this moisture that's going to be pulled out of the Gulf of Mexico, and with temperatures that are going to be ranging anywhere from the 70s to the 80s across this region, plus with that thicker cloud cover, which will likely limit instability, these dew points will definitely be a major aid in supporting a lot of strong instability across this region. Still not really too sure, can't really give an estimate just yet until we look at our Cape values, just because that cloud cover is giving me a little bit more uncertainty. But we have a lot of moisture that's being pulled out from the Gulf of Mexico, which will be more than enough to aid in supporting a lot of instability across this region and fueling those severe thunderstorms, with dew points that look like they're probably going to be getting upwards of 70 to even 75 degrees in the enhanced risk region. At least 70 degrees across this region will support a lot of instability, but again, we will have to continue to look at more of the contributing factors. Taking a look at our cloud cover and how that's going to affect our instability and in turn our risk for severe thunderstorms overall, we are expected to see insanely thick cloud cover across the eastern side of Tropical Storm Beryl, where our zone for severe thunderstorm development is going to be. And that is going to significantly limit surface heating as well as lapse rates, and again significantly limit our instability. And that's why I'm so uncertain, can't really give an estimate on instability until we look at it, because the cloud cover is kind of throwing me off a little bit. But because cloud cover is so thick, even at the high level, the high level at this point will be able to limit our surface heating if it didn't before. So again, we will likely see more limited instability, but there will likely be enough instability across this region with our pretty decent temperatures and an abundance of moisture to support enough instability to support the risk for severe thunderstorms and tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our instability and in turn our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we are expected to see some pretty weak lapse rates as previously expected due to that pretty thick cloud cover. Lapse rates that are basically going to not really affect our instability too much and probably going to be weak enough to even limit our instability in a way. So with the weak lapse rates, and because of the lack of strong surface heating, again, we will definitely see much more limited instability, but there will likely still be enough instability with our moisture and our temperatures to support enough instability and enough lift in that risk for tornadoes and that risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our most unstable Cape and how that's going to fuel our severe thunderstorms overall across this region, we are expected to see some pretty decent most unstable Cape values across this region, likely as a result of that streaming moisture and some pretty decent temperature values across this region, with most unstable Cape values that are expected to get upwards of 1,000, 1,500 joules per kilogram, and maybe even an isolated 2,000 joules per kilogram of instability across this region. However, once that is all depleted, it will not return whatsoever. And once instability is there, it will continue to weaken from here on out. So whatever our instability is at as of right now, it will continue to weaken. But as of right now, it is probably still more than sufficient. And what models are indicating are still more than sufficient in fueling the risk for tornadoes, including the potential of maybe even strong tornadoes, as well as the risk for some severe damaging wind gusts associated with some of these storms outside of tropical force wind gusts that are going to be associated with her Tropical Storm Beryl itself. Taking a look at our surface-based Cape as well as our convective inhibition, how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, because a tropical storm is currently ongoing across this region, we will not have any convective inhibition to really slow down our storms. So the cap is basically completely gone. There's nothing to impinge storm development. However, that also means that the atmosphere hasn't had time to really set in, and instability hasn't really had a whole lot of time to develop at the surface and get super strong and lead to potentially more explosive storms. However, that will likely not really affect our storms as of too much. The majority of our most unstable Cape does look like it is going to translate down to our surface-based Cape, allowing for surface-based storms and the potential for tornadoes across the enhanced risk region. But the lack of our convective inhibition will likely not really affect our storms too much. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms overall, we are expected to see a lot of 0 to 3 kilometer instability, likely as a result of a lot of strong low-level moisture across this region. And all this super strong 0 to 3 kilometer instability, coupled together with the insane amount of directional shear as a result of Tropical Storm Beryl, is likely what's leading to the ongoing tornado outbreak as of right now. Because we have so much fuel at the surface, which is going to immensely aid in supporting that risk for tornadoes across this region and the risk for severe thunderstorms, as well as that risk for damaging wind gusts. Even though that is going to be a little bit more on the lesser side of things, this is still an insane amount of 0 to 3 kilometer instability, and again is going to aid in supporting that risk for tornadoes and severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that's going to indicate the potential for tornadoes across this region, you can already tell that we have some pretty widespread and some pretty decently strong energy helicity index values across this region, with energy helicity index values that are expected to get upwards of 3 to 4 and maybe even some isolated 5s, maybe even an isolated 6 as indicated by this HRRR run. If we choose a random location for random sounding here, this is likely not going to be an accurate representation of the atmosphere as of right now. In fact, this is a little bit contaminated, so this is probably on top of a storm, but just bear with me. As of right now, it isn't too contaminated, but I think it, as of right now, it gives a pretty decent look of what the atmosphere was at least a couple hours ago. This is probably not what it looks like as I am recording this. Weekly sheared environment, weekly speed sheared environment, so we won't really have that much of a risk for hail, because again, that is a tropical system's kryptonite. We have an insanely nice hodograph here with a lot of curvature in the low levels of the hodograph, even the mid levels, and a lot of decent instability as well, some pretty moderately strong instability that's going to be more than sufficient in supporting the risk for tornadoes across this region, and some pretty nice veering of the winds with height. So that is leading to this probable hazard type of a particularly dangerous situation tornado. And that is honestly not too far from the truth either, because we have had, I think, a couple PDS tornado warnings already, at least one. Not sure how many there's been already, but there has been at least one PDS tornado warning across the Louisiana region. So this is honestly not too far off from the truth, and there could potentially be more to come. It really all depends. So that's why you guys need to be staying weather alert if you do live in the affected region. Taking a look at our 10-meter wind gusts and the risk for damaging wind gusts that are going to be associated with Tropical Storm Beryl as of right now. Because Tropical Storm Beryl is currently weakening, we won't have as great of a risk for damaging wind gusts as of right now. However, some strong, widespread damaging wind gusts are still going to be expected. They could not really be all that severe anymore, but still could potentially do damage and blow unsecured objects around, and maybe even some debris. So I definitely wouldn't suggest going outside to really test it. As of right now, it does look like Tropical Storm Beryl is significantly weaker than it was, and on the eastern side in the corridor where we could see the potential for severe thunderstorms in an ongoing tornado outbreak, we don't have that strong damaging wind gusts of 17 knots. On the western side, we do have a little bit greater damaging wind gusts on this HRRR run, upwards of 20 to even maybe an isolated 30 knots somewhere in here. So it's definitely not as strong because it is tropical storm now, and it is continuing to weaken over time as far as wind gusts go. So the damaging wind gust risk could have potentially been phased out already. If not, it definitely will over the next couple of hours as Tropical Storm Beryl continues to weaken. But that tornado risk is still definitely on that table, on top of that flooding risk. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong in this forecast or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. And 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are One Nation Weather, Weather Watcher, and JaxonWX, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.